Hello viewers, thanks for joining in. Today I will describe 4 levels of bike rides on Cape Cod, as defined by me. In this, a bike ride is defined as a whole ride, including transport by car if necessary. They're defined by level of effort in planning the ride, not in actually performing the ride. None are necessarily better, they're just different, and the levels could also be perceived by the number of users that are probably performing that particular type of ride. And I also perform pros and cons of each level and a suggested bike. Okay, level 1 is rail and canal trails, and so Cape Cod has many of these. An example is the Cape Cod Rail Trail. It goes from Yarmouth to Wellfleet. It's the longest trail that I'm aware of, and is a good resource. The Colonial Trail actually splits off in Harwich from the CCRT and goes to Chatham, and so that's a very nice network. The Shining Sea Bikeway goes from North Falmouth to Woods Hole, and it's another good resource. And there are trails on both sides of the canal, which are also nice. Pros: car interaction is low. You just have the intersections you have to deal with. As long as you're careful in those, you'll be fine. There's generally good scenery for these. Sometimes they do get a little bit monotonous with just being a straight line and trees down both sides. Flat and easy pedaling. Although in the canal, if you get a wind, you might find yourself having to do some effort to go against that wind. There's infrastructure like tools, facilities, benches, and signs, so you really are, you don't have to really make a lot of decisions in the ride whenever you're doing it. It is all laid out for you, and you can go out and then back up the same trail again, and it's a really good relaxing way to ride. Some of the cons: they can get busy, including walkers, and when there's a lot of walkers out, you really have to watch your speed. There is a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit, although I don't think there's any enforcement on it. And I have seen a collision from someone coming on the trail suddenly. And I always observe people going way too fast on the trail whenever there's lots of other users on it. So the only other con I can think of is really the surface is often damaged in places, particularly I think roots and things like that. They usually paint them so that you can see them well, but they're not as smooth as roads in general, depending on the road. The bike I would choose, just about any bike you really can do. It's a nice flat trail, and so whenever I go on the rail trails, I'm generally bringing my touring road bike. But you really don't even need a bike with gears. You can pretty much do whatever you want, just depending on how far you really want to ride. Okay, now level 2, I call the pavement. It's just about anywhere that has pavement, but really, the focus is on places that don't have a lot of traffic where you can safely ride. Of course, that's defined by whoever thinks is safe, but for the most part, I try to limit interaction with cars just because I don't want to get hit. Many roads can be accessed from rail trails, and so that's an option. Like if you want to include rail trails and then a little bit of pavement, oftentimes you find a road that'll go off to a beach. Some places also have wide paved sidewalks, such as Route 28 going into Hyannis, or Route 130 in Mashpee. Some of the cons: it takes a bit more thought or prior knowledge to plan a ride than, say, a rail trail, especially if you want to limit the interaction with cars. You might want to do it on a Sunday morning, for example, as far as like planning a ride, so there might be like less windows of doing particular rides. It can be tricky to design a long ride on the Cape, simply because there really aren't a lot of long roads, and so you're with a road bike, you can, or on roads, you can travel a bit further than you can on like another other types of surfaces, and so you kind of feel like you need to have a longer ride to and it's just hard to put together a longer ride on the Cape. It takes a bit more planning. Um, there's certainly not many rides on the Cape where you really can fall into a groove where you're just for several miles just kind of riding at a tempo. It's pretty up and down, and you're always making turns and other things. So that it's not a good place for like getting in your groove for a long pedal. The Cape is pretty hilly, so as far as selecting a bike, I think a road bike makes a lot of sense. I would choose a vintage road bike for myself personally, but a hybrid bike, a road bike, anything with somewhat efficient tires and some gears, I think will be fine. Level 3 mountain bike trails. There are several areas that are designated mountain bike trail places, and they're usually away from the coastline along the spine of the Cape, and they feature trails, improved trails, designated trails, old cartways, and then there's some improvised trails as well in different places. Some of the pros is obviously you really don't have any car interactions, so you have a safety in that sense. So whatever danger you get into is really how hard you really want to ride the trails. It's generally not crowded. The pros, you have a pretty minimal car interaction for the most part, particularly in the areas themselves. Generally not crowded, and so it's the best option to get away from people, I would say, to get some relaxation. It's a mix of flat and hilly, challenging trails, and so you can kind of select both based on where you go. You can link up different ride areas. For example, West Barnstable can link up with Sandwich using power lines, so look for opportunities to do things like that. The cons, some areas are heavily used by dog walkers. For example, West Barnstable, there's some areas where there's quite a number of walkers, and you can kind of figure out where those are and kind of avoid those areas if you don't want to deal with dog walkers. Not that there's anything wrong with them. It's just that it's just something else to worry about on the trail. Otherwise, there's not a lot of cons to these mountain bike trails. It's a really good system we have on the Cape. My choice, obviously, a mountain bike, but you don't need the newest, latest thing. And in fact, a lot of times having a bike that's not quite as capable makes the terrain a little bit more challenging and a little more fun. So don't think that you have to have the latest, greatest to go on a mountain bike trail. You can still go up all that terrain with the earliest mountain bikes from the 80s if you really want to. You just may feel a little bit more pain in some cases, and maybe you're pushing the bike here and there, but you can use them. So the level 4, which I kind of have as the top, is the big mix. And so what I mean by big mix is that basically you can go wherever you really want to. And the idea is to plan a ride and choose a bike that kind of allows you to kind of do a little bit of everything. And so in this scenario, perhaps the things you most want to ride are some of the single track trails, or some of the dirt roads and so forth. But to get to those, you may have to go through some pavement. You might use a rail trail to get from place to place, and that's what I like to do from where I live. And so I don't have to necessarily transport my bike in a car. Not that that's a bad thing, but generally I like to just take a ride from my house and go where I can go. And by doing some planning, the idea is to minimize the amount of traffic interactions to get to where I want to go. And so it comes down to looking at maybe an app, maybe Google Maps, maybe an app that provides some areas where people are cycling, and designing a route that makes sense. The pros are you can leave from one place. You don't have to transport, from your house. You're less likely to have encounters and encounter crowds if you design it that way. You experience many different types of surfaces on a ride, so it doesn't get monotonous, and there are many options for unique rides, and so it just opens up a larger amount of places you can go and explore, and you can likely see more things. The cons, for one, you have to do a little bit more research to figure out where you're going to ride in designing a ride. Although I don't always fully design a ride like from the start. I have ideas of where I'm going to go, and I'll kind of let my decision points actually guide me and how I actually finish the ride. It just comes down to knowing the terrain, and you do that by doing your research. And in cases like that where you're doing research, sometimes you'll find that there are dead ends. For example, I met up with the Mashpee River and realized that in the wintertime I really didn't want to go up to my ankles trying to cross the river, so I backtracked. So sometimes you're just going to have to accept that maybe a way that you're going is, or you have to hike a bike or something like that, or you might find that really you're going to be trespassing to go a particular route, which may not be a good idea. So for a bike, you really need something that's efficient. You really should use something that's efficient for all surfaces. And I guess it really depends on how long a ride you want to do. I certainly go anywhere from kind of a vintage mountain bike with a rigid front fork and relatively smooth, approximately 2-inch tires, to what I call a gravel bike that I made from a road bike with relatively thin 40mm tires by today's standards anyway. And those are the options that I would choose. The thing that you're going to find is in places that are really sandy, the wider tires are certainly going to help, but there are places that even tires aren't really going to help you, and you might have to push a bike in some places. In summary, these are the 4 levels of biking on Cape Cod. There are lots of options with bike rides, and so what I guess I'm trying to do in this particular video is encourage people to look outside of just like the base levels of cycling and look into other options, and that includes doing some planning and doing some exploring and finding some new things, and again, limiting the amount of cars that you have to encounter, which for me is something I guess I probably shouldn't worry so much, but it's definitely something that concerns me whenever I go out for a ride. Plan a ride, get your Ride with GPS app and Google Maps and maybe another type of app that's similar to Ride with GPS, and plan your routes and have some fun. So anyway, thank you for watching, and please leave a comment, and if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Bye.